One aspect of awakening, of self-realization, of enlightenment, has to do with awareness, recognizing and realizing itself as pure awareness. The other aspect, the foil that makes this possible, is seeing through the illusion of the feeling of I that normally obstructs and displaces and misappropriates awareness in the first place. In the fourth way, getting to the bottom, to the foundation of this feeling of I, is tied directly to the non-expression of negative emotions, followed by an in-depth study of negative emotions themselves, and ultimately leading to the possibility of transforming negative emotions into a higher dimension of perception and understanding and awareness. This journey into ourselves is a journey that awareness itself takes through the caverns of both the body and the mind. And it's a journey that raises several important questions. For example, what are negative emotions to begin with? How exactly do negative emotions operate inside us? And why are they part of the human psyche? What is their origin and their purpose? What is their intended result in the world of human beings? And then, what would it really mean to transform negative emotions? And why does the fourth way place emphasis on this idea of not expressing negative emotions? In most cases, for most human beings, negative emotions originate and take shape internally before they are then either swallowed in the form of suppression or spit out in the form of outward expression. And in both cases, reaching their, you could say, final solidification as a feeling of I. And the purpose of corralling and studying negative emotions is to uncover and gradually expose completely the deep-seated, deep-rooted feeling of I that lies at the core of our sense of identity as a person. This sense of identity, which has been so familiar to us since childhood, and which has been so habitually ground into our psyche as a legitimate feeling of self, is in actuality a psychological hologram. It's just a mental projection, and it turns out that it has no solid basis whatsoever. Yet so convincing is its appearance in the mind that it gets projected from there and out into the world in the form of our behavior and character and falsehoods as a person. And most noteworthy is how this projection of identity becomes a conduit for the physical expression of negative emotions. The more you see this, the more peculiar it seems to be as a manifestation of our visible behavior. But it's also because it is so visible that it can become a tool for self-observation, and in turn, for the conscious self-realization of the awareness that is behind self-observation. When we express negative emotions, we don't usually realize that their expression is a culmination and elimination of a complex cocktail of physiological and psychological ingredients. Nor do we suspect that it's possible to trace these negative emotions from their outer expression back through the process by which they got manufactured and all the way back to their source in the deep-seated feeling of I and me. If in fact we manage to engage on this journey to the bottom of our identity, we'll also discover that these peculiar formations called negative emotions are defense mechanisms of the ego, or what the fourth way calls imaginary I. Shrouded inside these negative emotions and protected by the negative emotions, almost as though being protected by layers of psychological blankets, there is burrowed in us this even more peculiar form, when you see it, of the sense of I. And it is exactly this seeing of it, this exposing of the illusion of it, that can yield such a profound inner transformation of being, whereby awareness realizes itself as the seer of the illusion. What really happens, of course, is that because it is an illusion, there is nothing to see. And awareness then realizes itself as the true source of being. In the fourth way, this discovery comes as part of a journey that comprises two main aspects. One is the study of how we express negative emotions outwardly and how we grant ourselves permission to express them, which is different for each person. The other aspect is the study of negative emotions internally. For example, how they form in our psychological world, the ingredients that go into forming them, and how these ingredients get woven into such a volatile mix, and how this overall process of the manufacture and justification and permission and expression, how all of that fortifies our feeling of I, and how it keeps this feeling of I intact at its core. In terms of the first aspect of what lies behind the expression of negative emotions, it becomes a study of things like the type of expression it is, such as impatience or irritation, or blame or accusation, or anger and violence, or different forms of self-pity or self-harm, or even anxiety and fear and depression. And then how we allow ourselves permission to act out and demonstrate these different emotions. This permission, for instance, can take the form of supposing that we need to express negative emotions, or that it's useful and necessary, or, as is considered the case today, even healthy to express them. Or perhaps we think we'll feel better if we express them, or that expressing them will bring about a better result or set the record straight. And all of these permissions, all of these reasons, all of this rationale is done in the name of I and me and my person. And then beyond this level of psychological rationale, there's the deeper aspect of the negative emotions themselves. And this refers to the urges and the impulses that they arise from originally, and then the beliefs and attitudes and points of view that those urges and impulses get funneled through and shaped into you could say, the unique logic that adds support to the whole mechanism, as well as the emotional hue that colors all of this with a flavor of deserved need or insistence or righteousness. And then how all of these ingredients they are emanating as characteristics of this imagined sense of self that they are reinforcing and protecting, and in many cases defending. the complete psychological structure of negative emotions is a bigger iceberg than it might seem to be at first. And this tool, or this lever of not expressing negative emotions, is just the tip of the iceberg. But it's a critical tip because it's the way in. It's sort of the doorway that leads into tracing this mechanism of negativity all the way to the bottom, to the root of the feeling of identity behind it. This journey, which begins with the non-expression of negative emotions, is not a minor undertaking, nor is it the usual journey of psychology or psychotherapy. And the reason is because it's a journey that's taken not by the ego or by the mind, but by awareness itself. This is why it has to be understood in the larger context of what it means that consciousness is usually, as the fourth way says, asleep in us, and how negative emotions keep it asleep, and what it means to transcend the notion, the illusion that resides at the nucleus of these negative emotions, regardless of the form they take and regardless of how they get expressed and or suppressed by us. It's all well and good, of course, to understand this whole process of negative emotions, how they form, how they get justified, how they get expressed. And it's useful, it's helpful to understand all of this, but the question remains, what does this have to do with transformation? What does it mean to transform negative emotions? You can see this in terms of looking back. If you can untie this knot from expression of negativity to its formation psychologically, all the way back to this sense of I that responds after we have an initial urge or impulse in the body, and see that this sense of I is artificial, then what it means is when the process tries to happen in its normal direction, in the reverse of which it's been traced, there's no nucleus now. There's nothing around which a negative emotion can form. And there's no reason then, there's no sense of identity behind the expression of a negative emotion. There may still be an impulse in the body. There may still be an immediate reaction to something that has a negative tinge to it, a negative taint. But because now you see through the illusion of I, there's no nucleus. These blankets of psychology and psychological rationale and justification and revenge and all of these things, they won't have anything to wrap around, and they will just collapse. It will be like a stool without legs. And then again, in the final, it won't even be able to reach the point of wanting to be expressed. And in terms of transformation, this already, what I've described, is remarkable if you can get to this point. But what happens now is all of this energy that had previously gone into reinforcing, establishing, projecting, and expressing this sense of identity, this sense of I, with this complex psychological apparatus of negativity wrapped around it, all of the energy that had gone into that is now free and available and released back to awareness itself. This is when there's a heightened consciousness. This is when this energy, if you like, leaves Earth, goes back into outer space, into a higher dimension of ourselves, which is awareness. And now this awareness, which had been locked up, tied up, imprisoned in the feeling of I and inside all these forms of negativity, this energy can now release back to where it came from, to its higher source. And that is transformation. That is what self-transformation means. It doesn't mean the person gets transformed. It means their consciousness or awareness is now released consciously from this tangle, from this psychological knot. And this is what self-realization, self-actualization is meant to lead to.